This is a story that begins where most stories end. Not with the triumph of good over evil, but with the heavy silence that follows it. The tale of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child unfolds 19 years after the Battle of Hogwarts, when the Dark Lord has fallen, and peace, at last, seems to reign. Yet peace, as life teaches us, is never simple, never perfect, and never free from shadows. This chapter is not about magic spells or wands flashing in the night. It is about inheritance, destiny, and the burden of Ligak. The days that followed Albus's sorting into Slytherin unfolded like a slow, burning storm, filled with whispers, stares, and uneasy silences that seemed to follow him through the corridors of Hogwarts. The castle, with all its enchantments and mysteries, should have been a place of wonder. But for Albus, it felt like a maze of judgment and shadow. Students eyed him curiously in the great hall, murmuring his name as if it were a spell. Potter, the son of the famous Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the hero of Hogwarts. And yet here he was, sitting under the green and silver banners of Slytherin, the very house that had once birthed the darkest wizard of all. The irony was not lost on anyone, least of all Albus himself. Every meal, every class, every careless comment seemed to remind him that he did not fit neatly into the world his family and name had built. His cousins from Gryffindor laughed freely across the room, while he kept his head low, his thoughts tangled in quiet frustration. He could feel the weight of his father's reputation pressing down on him like an invisible hand, guiding and suffocating all at once. Even when he tried to laugh, to blend in, to find comfort in the company of others, the ghost of expectation lingered, whispering that he was not enough, not brave enough, not special enough, not Harry Potter's son enough. Scorpius Malfoy, however, stood beside him like a soft beacon of light in the darkness. The two boys quickly became inseparable, drawn together by a shared sense of being outsiders in a school obsessed with lineage and legacy. Scorpius carried his own curse. A rumor that he was not Draco Malfoy's true son, but rather the child of Voldemort himself. A dark whisper that haunted his every step. Albus, in his loneliness, saw the pain in Scorpius's quiet smiles and awkward laughter, and found in him a reflection of his own struggle. Together, they began to create their own small universe within the grand walls of Hogwarts, a space where they could laugh without being compared to ghosts of the past. They spent hours in the library, hiding behind stacks of dusty books, talking about everything from time, Turners, and Famous, duels to the small, unspoken fears that kept them awake at night. For Albus, it was the fear of disappointing his father. For Scorpius, it was the fear of being hated for a legacy he did not choose. In their friendship, they found freedom. As the months passed, the seasons turned. The leaves of the forbidden forest blazed gold, then fell away, giving way to the bite of winter. Snow blanketed the castle, and yet Albus's heart remained restless. Every letter from home became a reminder of the growing distance between him and his father. Harry wrote proudly of James's successes in Gryffindor, of Lily's charm and laughter, but his words to Albus were stiff, careful, measured, as if written by a man unsure how to reach his own child. When Albus read them, he felt not love, but pressure, as though every sentence carried an unspoken comparison. The more his father tried to connect, the further Albus drifted. He began to dread holidays, when he would return to a home where the air hummed with unspoken tension. Their conversations turned sharp, their words heavy with misunderstanding. Harry, still haunted by his own past, could not see that his son's rebellion was not defiance but desperation, a cry to be seen for who he was, not who he was expected to be. At school, the rift between Albus and the world of Gryffindor deepened. Some students mocked him behind his back, calling him the Slytherin Potter, while others avoided him entirely, unsure of how to treat the son of a legend, who seemed to carry himself like an outcast. But Albus learned to meet cruelty with silence. Scorpius, ever loyal, tried to cheer him with humor and sweets from the trolley, though even laughter often gave way to reflection. Together, they began to question the stories they had been told, the tales of their father's youth, the certainty of good and evil, the idea that fate could be fixed. Hogwarts, for all its magic, began to feel like a stage where they were forced to play roles written long before they were born. It was during one of these restless nights, when the castle slept under a sky heavy with stars, that Albus overheard a conversation that would change everything. Hidden behind a suit of armor, he heard his father speaking with Amos Diggory, the aged father of Cedric, the boy who had died during the Triwizard tournament. Amos's voice trembled with years of grief and longing as he begged Harry to use a recovered time Turner, rumored to exist in secret Ministry possession. He pleaded for one chance, just one, to go back and save his son. Harry's refusal was firm, but his tone carried guilt, as though the past still gnawed at him. The words burrowed deep into Albus's mind. Save Cedric. The idea burned bright in him, twisting his confusion into purpose. Here, at last, was something he could do. Something to prove that he was not a mistake or a disappointment. Later, when he told Scorpius what he had heard, the two boys began to dream dangerous dreams. What if they could find the time turner? What if they could go back, change things, and right an old wrong? To Albus, it felt like destiny calling him. Not the destiny of his father, but one of his own making. Scorpius hesitated, his logical mind wary of tampering with time. But Albus's conviction was fierce, his heart pounding with the same reckless courage that had once driven Harry into forbidden places. He was certain that saving Cedric would not only heal an old wound, but also bridge the growing chasm between him and his father. If he could do something extraordinary, something heroic, then perhaps the shadow of Harry Potter would finally fade, and he could step into the light as his own person. The thought consumed him. Days passed, and lessons blurred into background noise. Even Quidditch matches, which once filled the castle with excitement, barely stirred him. He began to plan, to listen, to watch for any sign of the time turner. Every hallway felt like a secret waiting to be uncovered. Every whispered rumor like a clue. And when he learned that the time turner was being kept under ministry watch, a plan began to form, one both foolish and brilliant. Albus knew it would require courage, cunning, and trust. And he had both in Scorpius and in the restless ache of his heart. By the end of the school year, as the carriages rolled away and the castle faded into mist, Albus sat beside his friend, the weight of decision pressing heavily upon him. In his mind, the path ahead glittered with both danger and hope. Somewhere between the boy he was and the man he longed to be, he made a silent vow to rewrite a piece of history, to prove that even a Slytherin Potter could change the world. He did not yet understand the cost of such power, nor the way time itself bends and twists in defense of what must be. For now, there was only resolve, and the faint echo of his father's name behind him. No longer a beacon, but a shadow he was determined to outrun. Summer came softly to the world outside the magic that had shaped Albus Potter's young life. Yet for him, it arrived like a season, without warmth, a time of stillness that carried no peace. The days stretched long and quiet at number 12, Grimold Place, where the Potter family gathered in uneasy harmony. Harry's duties at the Ministry of Magic kept him away for most hours. But even when he was home, his presence felt distant, weighed down by unspoken worries. The house, once a hideout for war and whispers, now stood as a monument to history, a relic of battles fought and won, and of ghosts that refused to leave. The portrait of Sirius's mother still shrieked occasionally, muffled by charms and spells. But even her angry voice felt less haunting than the silence that had grown between father and son. Albus spent his mornings locked in his room, pretending to read, pretending to sleep, but mostly staring at the ceiling, thinking of the one thing that would not leave his mind the time. Turner. The memory of Amos, Diggory's trembling voice, and his plea for his son's life had carved itself into Albus's thoughts like an echo he could not silence. He imagined Cedric Diggory, kind, brave, the boy who had died because of someone else's cruelty, and felt a deep, unshakable pull toward the idea of undoing that pain. What if fate could be challenged? What if time could bend? Just once. For the right reason. Albus believed that if he could achieve that, he would finally escape the heavy shadow of his father's legacy and find meaning in his own story. But meaning, as fate often teaches, does not come easily. One afternoon, Harry appeared at the doorway of his son's room, awkward and tired, holding a small bundle, wrapped in faded cloth. It was an old blanket, the one Harry had been wrapped in when he was left on the Dursleys' doorstep as a baby. He offered it to Albus as a gesture of connection, of love, but the boy, restless and resentful, saw it as yet another reminder of a past that wasn't his to carry. The conversation that followed was sharp, painful, and brief. Harry tried to speak about family, about love and protection, but Albus heard only pressure, only the unspoken demand to live up to a name that had become a burden. When his father left the room, the air felt heavier, charged with a strange mix of guilt and defiance. That night, Albus lay awake, his heart pounding, his thoughts circling the same impossible plan: to steal the time, Turner, and use it to right an old wrong. Days later, fate itself seemed to conspire in his favor. News spread that Amos Diggory was staying at St. Oswald's home for old witches and wizards, and that Harry would soon visit him again on ministry business. The thought set fire to Albus's imagination. With Scorpius's help, he could find Amos, learn the truth about the time, Turner, and prove that he was capable of something extraordinary. The idea filled him with both dread and excitement, for he knew what he was considering was forbidden. Tampering with time had destroyed lives before. But the H to act, to be seen, outweighed fear. On the day Harry left for St. Oswald's, Albus waited for his chance. cloaked by invisibility and courage born of desperation. He followed his father through the twisting corridors of the old wizard's home, unseen and unheard. There, hidden behind a curtain, he overheard every word. Albus's voice trembling with grief, demanding that Harry return the time. Turner rumored to have been confiscated by the ministry, and Harry's calm refusal. Then came another voice, softer and younger, a girl's voice, introducing herself as Delphi, Amos's niece. Albus peered from behind the curtain, and what he saw struck him deeply. Delphi was older than he expected, with silver, blonde hair and eyes that seemed to hold both kindness and secrets. She smiled gently as she spoke to Amos, her voice laced with sorrow and strength. In that moment, Albus felt a connection he couldn't explain, as though fate had drawn him to her. When Harry departed, Albus stayed behind, revealing himself to Delphi, confessing who he was and why he had come. She listened with quiet fascination, her expression unreadable, and when he spoke of his desire to save Cedric, her eyes seemed to glimmer with something dangerous, yet irresistible. She told him that she believed in destiny, that perhaps he had been meant to find her, meant to carry out what his father could not. Her words were honey and fire, soothing and stirring all at once. When Scorpius joined them, nervous and doubtful, Delphi smiled at him too, her charm disarming even his caution. Together, she whispered, they could find the time. Turner. Together, they could rewrite history. That night, back at the Potter home, Albus felt alive for the first time in months. Every argument, every wound, every bruise upon his pride now seemed to lead to this. When his father came to say goodnight, Albus did not respond. His decision was already made. The next morning, before the sun rose, he packed his things quietly. Wand, robes, a few sweets from his mother's pantry, and met Scorpius at King's Cross Station. The station was still and empty, the great clock echoing above them. As they waited, they didn't speak much. Words felt too small for what they were about to do. Then, from the mist, Delphi appeared, cloaked and radiant, holding a small silver object that shimmered faintly in the early light. The time. Turner. Albus's breath caught. It was real. The past, the forbidden, the miraculous, all within reach. Delphi's eyes gleamed as she held it out, her voice low and urgent as she told them that magic like this was meant to be used for good, for justice, for love. She spoke of Cedric, of the pain his father had carried for years, of the chance to give him the life he deserved. The boys listened, spellbound. And though Scorpius hesitated, Albus's conviction was unbreakable. They clasped hands around the time. Turner, as Delphi instructed, their hearts hammering in unison. The world seemed to twist around them, light bending, air trembling, time itself trembling, as the spell was spoken. Then, in a burst of golden light, everything shifted. They were no longer at King's Cross, no longer in their own time. The ground beneath them was cold, the air thick with the scent of grass and fire. Albus stumbled, dazed, and when he looked up, he saw the familiar shape of a Quidditch stadium. Banners rippling in the wind. The roar of a distant crowd filling the air. They had arrived. Somewhere in the past. In the middle of the Triwizard Tournament. The enormity of what they had done hit them all at once. They were standing within history. Their choices unwritten. Scorpius looked terrified, whispering that they should go back. But Albus only stared at the glowing time. Turner, awe and purpose burning in his eyes. For the first time, he felt powerful. Not as his father's son. Not as a shadow. But as someone who could shape fate itself. Delphi's voice echoed beside him. Soft and persuasive, promising that this was only the beginning. Above them, the wind howled through time, and the story of Harry Potter and the Cursed began to twist into something darker, something far beyond what any of them could have imagined. You said the air that surrounded Albus Potter and Scorpius, Malfoy, was heavy with a strange, suffocating silence as they opened their eyes to a world that no longer resembled the one they had known. The familiar magic of Hogwarts had been replaced by something colder, darker, and far more oppressive. The once welcoming castle loomed like a fortress, its towers draped in banners of green and black, emblazoned, not with the crest of Hogwarts, but with the serpent of Slytherin, coiled and crowned. The sky above was a constant gray, streaked with black smoke, and the grounds that had once echoed with laughter now seemed deserted, lifeless, drained of warmth. As Albus and Scorpius stumbled to their feet, disoriented from the violent pull of the time. Turner, the reality of their situation, began to dawn on them. They had not merely changed one event, they had rewritten the entire world. Voldemort had won. Gone was the peace their parents had fought to secure. Gone were the smiles of the professors, the joyful chatter of the students, and the glow of safety that had once filled the ancient walls. Instead, portraits glared with suspicion. Torches burned low with a greenish hue, and whispers of fear echoed down the corridors like ghosts. Albus's heart pounded as he turned to Scorpius, whose face had gone White. This isn't Hogwarts. Scorpius murmured, his voice trembling. This is something else, something wrong. And deep down, Albus knew he was right. Somewhere in their desperate attempt to save Cedric Diggory, they had created a timeline where kindness had been crushed beneath the heel of power. As they wandered through the castle, they saw traces of the new regime. The Great Hall had been transformed into a hall of obedience, its long tables replaced with dark, rigid rows of students in identical black robes, marked with the emblem of Lord Voldemort. At the head of the room stood a massive statue, carved from obsidian, depicting Voldemort himself, wand raised high, his cold eyes staring down upon all who entered. The Sorting Hat, once a symbol of unity and destiny, hung shredded in a corner like a conquered trophy. The students they passed looked fearful, their faces pale and blank, their voices hushed to whispers. Even the teachers seemed subdued, their movements cautious, their gazes hollow. It was as though the soul of Hogwarts had been drained away, leaving behind only obedience and silence. Albus tried to speak to one of the students, to ask what had happened, but the boy recoiled, as if he had been struck, stammering something about Headmaster, Snape's laws, and the rule of the augury. The name made Albus's blood run cold. He turned to Scorpius, eyes wide. The augury. That's Delphi, he whispered. Somehow, she had risen to power in this twisted world. The realization hit like a curse. Delphi had used them. Used the time. Turner not to save Cedric, but to create a future where Voldemort reigned, and she ruled by his name. They retreated to an empty corridor, their breaths ragged and hearts pounding. We have to find a way back, Scorpius said urgently. We can't stay here. This isn't our time. But when Albus reached into his pocket, his heart sank. The time Turner was gone. In its place, a faint scorch mark glowed on the fabric, as though the device had burned itself out in their last desperate leap through time. Panic surged through him. She took it, he said, his voice breaking. Delphi took it, and now she's. His words were cut off by the sound of footsteps approaching. They ducked behind a tapestry, just as a group of dark students passed, talking in low, reverent tones about the glorious victory of the Dark Lord and the annual celebration of Voldemort Day. The words made Scorpius shudder. Voldemort Day, he whispered, has alive in this world, alive and ruling. The weight of that truth sank deep into their bones. Every change they had made, every ripple they had caused in time, had brought them here, to a reality where the light had been extinguished, and the name Potter was no longer a symbol of hope, but of disgrace. Determined to find answers, they sneaked into the library under the cover of night. The room was dimly lit, its shelves filled not with the usual colorful assortment of spell books, but with volumes of propaganda. Titles like The Rise of Voldemort, The Purity of Blood, and The Glorious Reign of the Augury. Albus's stomach churned as he flipped through the pages of a dusty ledger that detailed the Fallen, a list of those who had defied the Dark Lord. His father's name was there, Harry Potter, followed by the words, executed for treason. Albus felt the ground vanish beneath him. His father, the hero of the wizarding world, was dead in this reality, struck down as a rebel. His mother's name followed, along with those of Ron Weasley, Hermione Granger, and countless others who had once stood for light. Scorpius put a hand on his shoulder, his voice soft but steady. This isn't real, Albus. This isn't forever. We can fix it. But Albus's mind was reeling. He had wanted so badly to step out of his father's shadow, to make his own mark. And now, in trying to do so, he had erased his father's very existence. Before they could plan their next move, the library doors swung open with a bang. A tall, thin figure stepped inside, his black robes sweeping the floor, his pale face illuminated by the green glow of his wand. For a terrifying moment, Albus thought it was Voldemort himself. But then, he saw the sharp eyes, the hooked nose, and the faint scar across his cheek. Professor Snape. Scorpius breathed, stunned. Snape, alive in this world, regarded them with suspicion, but also with something else. A flicker of recognition. You don't belong here, he said coldly, his voice the same blend of silk and steel that had made generations of students quake. Who are you? When they hesitated, he raised his wand higher. Answer me, or I'll. We're from another time. Albus blurted out. We tried to fix something, but we made everything worse. Snape's eyes narrowed, calculating, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then, surprisingly, he lowered his wand. You're telling the truth, he said quietly. And if that's the case, then you've done something very foolish indeed. This world is not one you wish to remain in. He turned away, gesturing for them to follow. Come. Quickly. There's someone you need to meet. He led them through hidden passages and down narrow staircases until they reached a small underground chamber flickering with candlelight. Inside were two familiar figures, though worn and hardened by years of war. Ron Weasley, his once laughing face now lined with scars, and Hermione Granger, her eyes fierce but wary. They were leaders of the resistance, the last remnants of hope in a world consumed by darkness. When Albus revealed his identity, Hermione's face softened with disbelief and pity. "Harry's son," she whispered. From another time. They explained everything. The time, Turner, Delphi, Cedric, the changes. And as they spoke, understanding dawned on the adults' faces. Hermione leaned forward, urgency in her voice. "If what you're saying is true, there's still a chance. The timeline can be repaired. But only if you go back to the exact moment you disrupted." Snape nodded gravely. "The augury keeps the time. Turner in the Dark Lord's vault beneath the castle. It is guarded, but not impossible to reach." He paused, his dark eyes softening for the briefest moment. "You must succeed. The world cannot remain like this." And so, a plan was forged. A desperate, dangerous plan to infiltrate the vault, retrieve the time, Turner, and undo the catastrophe they had caused. As they prepared to leave, Snape placed a hand on Albus's shoulder. "Your father would have done the same," he said quietly. "He always believed the impossible could be undone." The words struck deep, filling Albus with both pain and hope. Together, with Scorpius by his side, he vowed to fix what they had broken, to restore the world that had been lost. As they stepped into the shadows once more, their wands drawn, and their courage trembling, the faint echo of Voldemort's laughter drifted through the darkened halls. A chilling reminder that time itself was their greatest enemy, and that redemption would demand everything they had left. The cold, oppressive silence of the darkened corridors followed Albus, Scorpius, Malfoy, as they prepared for what might be their most dangerous mission. The time to find them Hogwarts and retrieve the time Turner that could undo the chaos they had unleashed upon time itself. Next upon time itself. Self will emerge. Time itself. The plan, forged in whispers with Snape, Hermione, and Ron, was fraught with peril. Every step, a risk that could cost them not only their lives but the last flicker of hope left in this cursed version of the wizarding world. The air felt heavy with destiny as Snape guided them through the narrow tunnels that snaked beneath the castle, his black cloak flowing like shadow behind him. Albus felt the gravity of the moment pressing on his chest. The weight of the world he had broken. The faces of his family erased by his mistake, and the hope that, if they succeeded, he might restore them all. Remember, Snape whispered, his voice low, but commanding. The vault is guarded by enchantments older than Hogwarts itself. You must move with silence, think with caution, and trust each other completely. Scorpius nodded, clutching his wand so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "We've come this far," he said, his voice trembling between fear and courage. "We won't stop now." As they approached the concealed entrance, a faint hiss echoed through the tunnel. Ancient magic awakening from slumbered. The wall ahead shimmered, revealing a massive serpent, carved in obsidian stone. Its eyes glowed green, its tongue flickering like a live flame. "Speak," Snape instructed quietly. "It demands the language of its master." Albus hesitated, then remembered the one skill he had inherited from his father that no one else could. Parseltongue. He took a breath, the sound strange and serpentine in his throat. "Open," he hissed, and the stone serpent's eyes flared brighter. Before the wall split apart, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Snape's eyes flickered with a strange mix of pride and sorrow. "You truly are his son," he murmured. They descended in silence, the air growing colder with every step, until the staircase opened into a vast underground chamber, illuminated by green fire. The vault stretched out before them. Walls of black, metal etched with runes, rows of relics from the dark Lord's reign, and at the center, resting on a pedestal of bone, the time Turner gleamed like a dying star. But as they approached, the air rippled, and shadows materialized into forms. Death Eaters, silent and watchful, guarding the relic of their master. Their faces were hidden behind masks of silver and black, and their wands glowed with readiness. Snape stepped forward, his voice sharp and commanding. "Stand down," he ordered, his presence radiating authority. "By decree of the headmaster, this vault is under my control." For a heartbeat, it seemed they might obey. But then one of the masked figures stepped forward, pulling off his mask to reveal a cruel, familiar face. It was Draco Malfoy, or rather, the Draco of this twisted timeline, his eyes hard and loyal to Voldemort. "You were loyal once, Severus," he said coldly. "But betrayal leaves a mark that never fades. The Dark Lord knows your treachery." Before Snape could respond, spells erupted in every direction, green and red light flashing through the chamber like lightning. Albus and Scorpius dove behind a column, their hearts pounding. The air crackled with the scent of burning stone as Snape's voice boomed above the chaos, casting shield after shield, holding off the storm of curses that filled the room. Go, he shouted. Get the time? Turner. Now. With no time to hesitate, Albus and Scorpius sprinted toward the pedestal. The time? Turner glowed brighter as they neared, its delicate ring spinning slowly, as if aware of their presence. But before they could reach it, a powerful spell struck the ground before them, knocking them backward. Delphi stood in the entrance of the vault, her eyes burning with fury and triumph. Her wings, faint and spectral, shimmered behind her, like those of the mythical augury she called herself after. You really thought you could undo perfection? She sneered. This world belongs to him. To us. You are nothing but echoes of a mistake long corrected. Her wand raised, her magic surging, and the temperature of the room dropped until even the flames burned blue. Albus struggled to his feet, his wand shaking. This isn't perfection, he shouted. This is hell. Delphi smiled darkly. Hell is only for those who lose. With a flick of her wrist, she sent a curse that shattered the pedestal, scattering shards of bone and sparks of green light. The time, Turner, flew across the room, landing at Scorpius's feet. Take it. Albus yelled, and Scorpius dove for it, clutching the fragile device, as Delphi turned her wrath upon them. The duel that followed was chaos. Spells colliding, dust and fire filling the air. The echoes of Snape's voice, still fighting off Death Eaters in the background. Delphi was faster, stronger, her magic honed by years of dark tutelage. Albus could barely block her attacks, his arm aching, his vision blurred by fear. You can't win, child, she hissed, her wand aimed at his chest. You're a shadow of a man who never understood true power. But before she could strike, a flash of silver light burst across the room. Snape, his wand cutting through the air, casting a shield that enveloped both boys. You will not touch them? He growled, stepping between Delphi and her prey. She turned her gaze on him, her lips curling into a cruel smile. You, of all people, should know better than to defy destiny. Destiny, Snape said, his voice calm but edged with iron, is rewritten by those who dare. With that, he unleashed a wave of magic so fierce that it sent Delphi sprawling backward, crashing into the far wall. The boys didn't wait. Scorpius grabbed Albus's hand, holding the time, Turner tightly. He cried, "We can't leave him." Albus began, but Snape cut him off. "Go! That's an order." His eyes, for the briefest moment, soft. "Tell Harry I did what I could." Before they could argue, he raised his wand again, holding back a wave of curses as the time. Turner began to spin, light enveloping the boys, in a blinding whirl of gold. The last thing they saw, before the world dissolved, was Snape, standing alone, defiant against the darkness, his silhouette framed by fire and shadow. Then, silence. When Albus and Scorpius opened their eyes, the air felt different. Cleaner, lighter. They were no longer in the vault, but somewhere in the past again. The familiar warmth of sunlight filtering through the trees around them. The time. Turner lay still in Scorpius's hand. Cracked but intact. They had escaped, but at a terrible cost. Albus sank to his knees, his chest heavy with guilt and grief. "He saved us," he whispered. "Snape saved us." Scorpius nodded, tears streaking his face. "He saved the future." They sat in silence for a long moment. The weight of what they had witnessed pressing down like a mountain. They had seen courage, born in the darkest place. Sacrifice made by a man the world had misunderstood. And though the pain lingered, there was also resolve, the knowledge that they still had a chance to put everything right. As the wind stirred the leaves and the sunlight grew brighter, Albus tightened his grip on the broken time. "Turner, we'll finish this," he said softly. "For him. For everyone." And with that, the two boys rose once more, ready to face the final battle that time itself demanded of them. The golden light of the time. Turner faded slowly, leaving Albus Potter and Scorpius. Malfoy standing in the cool air of a world that finally felt alive again. The wind rustled the trees, birds sang in the distance, and sunlight filtered through the leaves, like the memory of hope returning. After the suffocating darkness of Voldemort's reign, this moment felt like breathing after nearly drowning. They had escaped the cursed timeline. But the battle was far from over. The time, Turner, cracked and flickering weakly in Scorpius's trembling hand, was their only key to restoring the world completely. "Where are we?" Albus asked, his voice hoarse, his eyes darting around the forest. Scorpius looked down at the faintly glowing device, squinting at the spinning dials. "Somewhere in the past again. But not where we started," he murmured. "It's unstable. One more jump like that, and it might shatter completely." Albus's stomach twisted. If the time Turner broke, they would be trapped, forever lost in the ripples of time. But there was no other choice. They had to find Delphi before she could use another version of the device to rewrite history again. The memory of Snape's sacrifice still burned in Albus's chest like a brand. The thought of his courage, of his calm defiance, against the darkness filled him with both grief and determination. "We can't let his death mean nothing," he said firmly. "We finish this." They began to walk, following the faint hum of magic that seemed to call from somewhere deeper in the forest. Each step carried them closer to a truth that neither was ready for. The air grew warmer, and distant sounds, cheering, laughter, the echo of music, drifted toward them. "Do you hear that?" Scorpius asked, stopping suddenly. They crept forward until they emerged from the trees and saw the shimmering glow of the Tree-Wizard tournament grounds. Banners fluttered in the breeze, and students and professors milled about, their robes bright with excitement. It was the day of the third task, the day Cedric Diggory was meant to die. Delphi must have come here. She had told them before that she only wanted to meet her father, but Albus knew now that her goal was much darker. She intended to change the ending to make sure Voldemort triumphed once and for all. "This is it," Albus whispered. "This is where it happens." The enormity of it hit him like a blow. They weren't just witnesses to history. They were standing at the edge of it, holding the power to break or preserve the future. Scorpius's hand trembled as he tightened his grip on the cracked time. "Turner. One mistake," he said quietly, "and everything we know is gone again." Albus nodded. "Then we can't make any." As they slipped closer to the maze that had been conjured for the final task, the air shimmered with enchantments. The hedges rose like towering walls of green, pulsing faintly with dark energy. The crowd roared as Harry, Cedric, and Victor crumbled the labyrinth, their figures soon swallowed by the living maze. Albus and Scorpius knew what would come next. The portkey, disguised as the True Wizard Cup, would transport Harry and Cedric to the graveyard in Little Hangleton, where Voldemort would rise again. The future had already been written, but Delphi's interference could twist it into something far worse. They searched frantically for her, darting between tents and shadows, until they spotted her, standing at the edge of the maze, her hood drawn low, her wand glowing faintly in her hand. "Delphi," Albus hissed, stepping out from behind a tent. She turned slowly, her eyes gleaming with madness and longing. "You shouldn't have followed me," she said softly. "You can't stop what's already destined." Scorpius moved beside Albus, raising his wand. "Destiny isn't yours to decide," he shot back. Delphi smiled, almost pitying. "You still don't understand, do you? I'm not trying to change the past for myself. I'm restoring what was meant to be. My father was cheated by time, by fate, by your family's arrogance. I will give him the victory that was stolen. Her voice trembled with conviction, and for a moment, she looked less like a villain and more like a child begging the world to make sense of her pain. But Albus saw through the illusion. You think this is love, he said, quietly. But it's just destruction. He never cared for anyone. Not you, not anyone. Her expression hardened instantly. You're wrong, she hissed, her magic flaring. He will know me. Before they could react, she flicked her wand, and the cracked time, Turner, in Scorpius's hand glowed violently. A vortex of golden light exploded around them, dragging all three into another spiral of time. The world bent and screamed as the past and future collided once more, and then silence. When the light faded, they stood not in the forest, not in the maze, but in a graveyard beneath a moonlit sky. Albus's heart sank. They were in Little Hangleton. The air was thick with dread, the tombstones slick with mist. In the distance, faint voices echoed. Harry's voice, terrified but brave, and Cedric's, confused and startled. They had arrived moments before the resurrection of Voldemort. Delphi's eyes glistened with tears as she looked toward the gathering of robed Death Eaters. The empty cauldron, Chaliceran, and the infant, like creature that would soon become her father. He's here, she whispered, her voice trembling with awe. He's here. She stepped forward, but Albus grabbed her arm. Don't, he shouted. You'll destroy everything. She whirled on him, fury blazing in her eyes. Everything's already destroyed. You don't understand what it's like to live as a secret, as a shadow no one believes exists. I will not be forgotten. A duel erupted, fierce and blinding, curses slicing through the night like lightning. Delphi's power was immense. Every spell she cast crackled with raw emotion, fueled by her desperation to be seen, to be acknowledged. Albus and Scorpius fought side by side, their wands flashing in perfect rhythm. Their movements driven by something beyond fear. Hope. The ground trembled as their spells collided, sparks scattering over the graves. In the chaos, the cracked time, Turner was knocked from Scorpius's hand, tumbling across the ground. Delphi lunged for it, but Albus tackled her, both of them crashing into the dirt. You can't bring him back, he cried, struggling to hold her down. He's gone. Let him go. Delphi's face twisted in anguish. He's my father, she screamed. I'm his heir. His legacy. Albus's voice broke as he shouted, then be better than him. For a heartbeat, something flickered in her eyes. Doubt. Pain, maybe even understanding. But then the sound of Voldemort's cold, high voice echoed across the graveyard. Heal the spare. The moment froze. Delphi looked toward the source of the voice, tears streaming down her face. He's here. She whispered again, but this time, her voice was hollow. In that instant of distraction, Scorpius seized the time, Turner, and smashed it against the ground. A blinding surge of light exploded outward, freezing Delphi in place as if time itself refused to obey her. The golden light wrapped around her like chains, pulling her backward, erasing the distortion she had created. No, she screamed, her voice fading into the wind. You can't take him from me. And then, she was gone, vanished into the folds of time. Her magic extinguished. The graveyard shimmered, shifting back to the moment that history had always remembered. Harry facing Voldemort. Cedric's lifeless body lying beside him. And the prophecy of darkness and light fulfilled exactly as it was meant to. The time. Turner's remnants lay in the dirt, broken beyond repair. The world was restored. When the light faded completely, Albus and Scorpius found themselves back in the present, standing at the edge of the lake at Hogwarts. The sky was calm. The castle towers glowed warmly, and the world felt right again. Albus sank to his knees, his body trembling with exhaustion. It's over, he whispered. Scorpius nodded, his face pale but peaceful. We did it. For a long time, they said nothing, listening only to the soft lapping of the water against the shore. The sun began to rise, casting gold over the castle. He'd be proud, you know, Scorpius said quietly. Snape. Your dad. All of them. Albus managed a weak smile. He said. But I think I'm just proud we fixed it. As the morning light broke, fully over Hogwarts, the two boys sat together in silence, their hearts lighter than they had been in what felt like forever. The curse was broken, the timeline restored, and the lesson clear. Even in the shadow of the darkest magic, love, friendship, and courage could still rewrite the story of time itself. Bah. Chapter. The dawn that rose over Hogwarts. After the storm of any of the morning the castle had ever known. It was as if the ancient stones themselves were sighing with relief, basking in the soft glow of renewal. Albus, Potter, and Scorpius. Malfoy stood by the edge of the great lake, their reflections rippling in the golden water. Their faces pale, but calm, marked by everything they had seen and survived. The world had been restored, the timelines repaired, the curse undone. But in their hearts, the echoes of what they had endured lingered, like the fading hum of a powerful spell. The memories of alternate realities, the death of their families, the reign of Voldemort, Snape's final sacrifice, Delphi's desperate face, hung between them like ghosts of a life that might have been. Albus stared across the lake at the reflection of Hogwarts, the castle's spires glowing in the sunlight, and felt both wonder and guilt. "We brought it all back," he murmured. "But it still feels like something's missing." Scorpius, who had been silent for a long while, finally spoke. "Maybe it's because we've seen what could have been. Once you've looked into the worst version of the world, the real one never looks quite the same." His voice was steady, but his eyes were shadowed with exhaustion. Albus nodded slowly, feeling the truth of that settle deep within him. As they made their way up the familiar stone path to the castle, the air seemed charged with quiet magic. The students they passed greeted them with smiles, unaware of the cosmic battle that had unfolded beyond their understanding. To everyone else, it was just another peaceful morning at Hogwarts. But Albus and Scorpius, every detail shimmered with meaning. The laughter in the corridors, the chatter in the great hall, even the flickering torches seemed sacred now. They had almost lost this, almost erased this world of laughter and learning, of friendship and family. When they entered the great hall, the scent of breakfast filled the air, and the house tables buzzed with conversation. Professor McGonagall stood at the front, her expression sharp, but kind as ever, her eyes scanning the room with a warmth that had been missing in the dark timelines they'd seen. "Potter, Malfoy," she said, noticing them. "You two look as though you've wrestled a Hungarian horntail and lived to tell the tale." Scorpius offered a weak smile. "Something like that, Professor." McGonagall studied them closely, her sharp gaze softening for a brief moment. "You both look older," she said quietly, and turned away before they could respond. Neither boy could tell if she had meant it literally, or as an unspoken acknowledgement that some experiences leave marks deeper than scars. After breakfast, they found themselves summoned to the headmistress's office, where Harry Potter waited with his familiar mixture of concern and authority. His eyes, those same bright green eyes that had seen too much of life's battles, met Albus's, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Then Harry broke the silence, his voice gentle. You've been through something, haven't you? Albus hesitated. He couldn't possibly explain it all. The timelines, the vault, Delphi's fury, Snape's final act. But something in his father's tone made him realize he didn't need to. Yes, he said simply. Something big. Harry nodded slowly, as if he understood more than words could convey. You remind me of me when I was your age, he said. Quietly. Always trying to fix the world, even when it isn't your job to. Albus felt a lump rise in his throat. I didn't want to fix the world, he said softly. I just didn't want to feel like I didn't belong in it. Harry walked around the desk and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. You always belonged, Albus. You just didn't see it yet. The warmth of that touch, the sincerity in his father's words, filled the space between them with something that had long been missing. Understanding. The wall that had once divided father and son began to crumble, not with grand gestures or spells, but with simple, honest connection. When Harry learned of Delphi's defeat and the broken time, Turner, his expression grew somber. She'll be remembered as a warning, he said. Not everyone can live with the truth of their bloodline. Some try to rewrite it. Albus thought of Delphi's face in those final moments, how her eyes had flickered between rage and sorrow, and felt an rage of sympathy. She didn't just want power, he said quietly. She wanted love. And that's what made her dangerous. Harry nodded, understanding all too well. Love can save you, or it can destroy you, if you twist it into something else. The conversation lingered in Albus's heart long after they left the office. As they walked through the corridors, Scorpius nudged him. So, he said, with a crooked smile, are we done with time travel for good? Albus gave him a small grin. I think I've had enough timelines for a lifetime. Good, Scorpius said. Because I'd rather our next adventure be something normal. Like surviving potions without exploding anything. For the first time in what felt like forever, Albus laughed. A real, unguarded laugh that echoed through the hall like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. That evening, they returned to the lake, drawn by a shared need for silence and reflection. The sky was painted in hues of orange and gold, and the water mirrored every color with perfect stillness. Do you ever think about what it means? Scorpius asked suddenly. All of it. The timelines, the mistakes, the people who aren't here anymore. Albus nodded, watching the ripples spread from a single pebble he had thrown. Yeah? I think it means we're all part of something bigger. Every choice, every act, it changes something. Even the smallest moment matters. Scorpius smiled faintly. You sound like a philosopher now. Maybe I learned from the best. Albus replied. Snape. My dad. Even you. The name, Snape, hung in the air like a solemn melody, and for a while, they both stared into the sunset in silence. Albus thought of the man who had died twice, to save the future. First for love, then for hope, and felt a strange peace settle over him. Do you think he knows? Scorpius asked softly. That we fixed it. Albus looked at the horizon, where the sun dipped into the water. I think he always knew, he said. As night fell, the stars appeared one by one, each glowing faintly, like memories, written in the sky. The castle, lights flickered in the distance. And from somewhere deep within, the faint sound of laughter drifted through the night. The world felt right, balanced, alive. Albus turned to Scorpius and said, You know, for all the trouble we caused, I'm glad it was us. Scorpius grinned. Me too. Though next time, maybe we try saving the world without breaking time first. They both laughed, and for the first time in a long while, their laughter carried no weight of fear or guilt. Only joy. As they made their way back to the castle, the moon rose high, silvering the path before them. Each step they took felt like a step toward a new beginning, not just for them, but for every life their actions had touched. When Albus finally lay in bed that night, the castle quiet and peaceful around him, he found himself thinking, not of what had been lost, but of what had been gained. The boy who had once felt cursed by his father's name now understood its true meaning. Not a burden, but a legacy of courage, love, and redemption. The cursed child had become the child who had faced the curse and overcome it. As he drifted to sleep, the faint glow of the stars through his window seemed to whisper an unspoken truth. That the past, no matter how dark, always leads to the light for those who dare to believe in it. And somewhere, in the fabric of time itself, the echoes of every sacrifice, every friendship, and every act of love still shimmered, holding the world together. Proof that even in a universe shaped by magic, the greatest spell of all was the human heart's ability to forgive, to endure, and to begin again. Relive. Chapter 9d. The morning, after the final battle, with Delphi dawned clear and golden, yet within the walls of Hogwarts, the air shimmered with the quiet hum of reflection, as though every stone, tapestry, and portrait understood that the world had been subtly but profoundly changed. Albus. Potter awoke to the soft light filtering through his dormitory window. The events of the past days, lingering in his mind, like fragments of a dream, both haunting and hallowed. He had seen death, courage, and time itself bend and twist under the weight of choices. And now, that it was all over, the silence felt almost foreign. As he rose from his bed, Scorpius Malfoy stirred across the room, blinking, sleepily, but smiling with that familiar warmth that grounded Albus through every storm. "We're still here," Scorpius said softly, half in disbelief, and Albus nodded, feeling the truth of those words deep in his chest. The chaos of timelines and battles had ended, but the lessons remained, echoing like distant whispers through the corridors of his thoughts. Together, they dressed in their Hogwarts uniforms, the fabric comforting in its normalcy, and stepped out into the corridor, where sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting the floor with color. The laughter of younger students floated in the air, mingling with the distant clatter of breakfast in the great hall. Everything seemed so ordinary, and yet to Albus, every sound and sight felt miraculous, each a reminder that life had been restored to its rightful rhythm. As they entered the great hall, their eyes found familiar faces. Rose Granger, Weasley waving cheerfully, Professor McGonagall presiding from her chair with that sharp, knowing look, and even the ghostly nearly headless Nick floating serenely by. Harry Potter sat at the staff table, conversing quietly with Hermione, and Ron, though his eyes occasionally flicked toward his son, full of pride and relief. When Albus and Scorpius took their seats, whispers rippled around them. Tales of their mysterious absence had spread, though no one truly knew the magnitude of what had transpired. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" Scorpius murmured. "To be sitting here eating porridge, when we've seen the end of the world." Albus smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the point. The world goes on." For a moment, they ate in silence, surrounded by the comforting buzz of normal school life. But beneath it, both boys felt the quiet bond that connected them. A bond forged in the crucible of time, sealed by shared courage and unspoken understanding. After breakfast, Professor McGonagall called them to her office. Her stern gaze softened as they entered, her fingers interlaced on her desk. "Potter. Malfoy," she began, her Scottish lilt both authoritative and kind. "You've caused this school no small amount of worry. And, from what I can gather, no small amount of heroism." The boys exchanged a glance, unsure how to respond. "We only wanted to fix things," Albus said quietly. "We didn't mean for it to go so far." McGonagall's eyes twinkled faintly. "Intentions, Mr. Potter, are the seeds of both chaos and change. What matters is that you learned which is which." She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "I've seen many generations of students pass through these halls, your father among them. And while your choices were reckless, your courage speaks volumes. Remember, both can coexist in a true Gryffindor. Or, in your case, whatever house you belong to at heart." Scorpius grinned at that. "Even a Slytherin." McGonagall's lips curved into the ghost of a smile. "Even a Slytherin, Mr. Malfoy. Especially a Slytherin." The warmth in her tone lingered as they left her office, and both boys felt lighter, as though the weight of guilt that had clung to them had begun to fade at last. That afternoon, they walked the grounds together, the autumn breeze stirring the fallen leaves around their feet. The forbidden forest loomed in the distance, dark and mysterious as ever, and for a moment, Albus thought of the many times his father must have walked these same paths, facing dangers that echoed their own. "Do you ever wonder," Scorpius asked, "if we were meant to go through all this? Like, maybe fate chose us?" Albus considered this for a long moment before replying. "Maybe. But I think fate only gives you the map. You still have to decide where to go." Scorpius smiled. "That's deep. You sound like Dumbledore." Albus chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." As they approached the lake, they stopped at the water's edge, watching the reflection of the castle shimmer across its surface. The memories of Delphi, her madness, her loneliness, flitted across Albus's mind. He could still see her face twisted with longing and fury, a reflection of everything dark and desperate in the human heart. "Do you think she's still out there?" he asked softly. Scorpius shook his head. "No. She's gone. But what she tried to do, what she believed, will always remind us how dangerous loneliness can be." Albus nodded, understanding all too well. He had felt that same isolation, the same hunger to prove himself, and it had nearly consumed him. "Maybe that's why we survived," he said quietly. "Because we had each other." As dusk approached, Harry found his son sitting alone near the lake, lost in thought. The setting sun bathed the world in a soft orange glow, and for a long moment, Harry simply stood there, watching him. The boy who had once felt like a stranger, now growing into his own. "Mind if I join you?" Harry asked gently. Albus shook his head, and his father sat beside him, their reflections rippling together in the water. Silence hung between them, comfortable and full of unspoken understanding. "You remind me of myself," Harry said at last. "When I was your age, I thought I had to carry the world on my shoulders too." Albus glanced at him. "And did you?" Harry smiled faintly. "Until I learned that no one carries it alone." The words settled into the quiet air like a spell, and Albus felt something shift inside him. A release, a peace that had eluded him for so long. He said after a moment, "For hating who I was. For hating who you were." Harry turned to him, eyes shining. "You never have to apologize for trying to find yourself, Albus. That's what growing up is." For the first time, Albus reached out, his hand, brushing his father's, and the connection that had once felt so strained now pulsed with warmth. Later that evening, Albus met Scorpius in the courtyard, where the stars had begun to bloom across the sky, like tiny candles in the dark. "You know," Scorpius said, glancing up, "maybe all this? Magic, time travel, curses. It's not about changing the past. Maybe it's about learning to live with it." Albus smiled, feeling the truth in those words. Then, as we finally learned the right spell, they stood there in silence. Two boys who had crossed time itself and come back with the wisdom of men twice their age. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of autumn and the faint laughter of other students, reminding them that life, for all its chaos and pain, always found a way to move forward. That night, as Albus lay in his bed, he closed his eyes and let his thoughts drift. He saw the faces of everyone who had touched their journey. Snape, who had redeemed his legacy. Delphi, who had lost herself to the darkness of her own making. Scorpius, whose friendship had been his anchor through every storm. And Harry, the father he finally understood. The castle around him breathed softly, ancient and alive, holding centuries of stories within its walls. And in that moment, Albus realized that being a Potter wasn't a curse. It was a story. One still being written, full of light and shadow, triumph and pain, but always moving toward love. As he drifted into sleep, the last thought that crossed his mind was one of hope. That the future, no matter how uncertain, was theirs to shape. And somewhere beyond the veil of dreams, the faint echo of magic whispered its eternal truth. That even in the darkest of times, the heart's courage could rewrite destiny itself.